The readings today were a very interesting group of readings. I would first like to talk about that first reading. It's from the Acts of the Apostles. If you will notice, they did not call Paul Paul, but they called him Saul, which meant he was brand new in conversion. Can you all hear me? I just turned my mic off. Can you hear me? He had begun to do healing. Finally, he found himself in Jerusalem, not trusted by anybody. The reason why, because he was the one who was that zealot rabbi who went around kind of damaging the church. A lot of people were hurt by him. A lot of people died because of him. A lot of people were stoned to death by him. He was a man who was going to crush the name of Christ Jesus down to the ground. He was not the Messiah. And then we know he has that experience and is filled with the Spirit of God. And he begins to preach and coming to Jerusalem. Nobody trusts him. Nobody trusts him. And you will see for a long time that nobody will trust him. But then you stop and see that there's some people who come to his rescue. Convince the apostles the man is true what he says. He's preaching the good news of the Lord. And they're swayed to believe. The interesting thing about that is that they are kind of pruned. And I guess I want to say that today I want to talk about that pruning. Pruning is a very difficult thing for us to understand because when you hear it in the gospel, it's the very first thing that you don't want to hear. You are pruned so that you may bear much more fruit. The disciples did not want to hear Saul's words. They finally began to be somewhat pruned so that they could understand what Saul was saying to them. And as they heard him, they were more and more convinced that he really had the conversion he talked about. But he realized that the pruning did not go all across the community. He eventually had to leave that community in Jerusalem and go somewhere else. And even where he went back to someplace else, they stoned him and ran him out of town. They did not trust Saul at all. So it would take a long time for the people to, quote, be pruned. And Paul also to be pruned because of the conversion that happened in his life. I'd like to talk about that. Because as we hear this gospel today, we talk about pruning. And I have to smile because in the last few weeks, there's been a lot of pruning going on in your backyards. Remember that? Remember how you went outside and began to get ready for spring? You pruned things down. You thought you were all ready to go. And then after you got all things all set and ready to go, you went back to your house and said, it's all been pruned, it's all ready to flourish now. And then came the freeze. And now, as you look at your backyard, you've really pruned a lot of things back now because a lot of things have almost died. But as you look at that, you can see why Jesus uses that example of pruning because pruning is necessary sometimes to allow a plant to grow. If you go back into your lessons about Jerusalem and about this theme of grapes and vines, you come to understand that the grapevine was the national symbol of the Israelite people. Just like the eagle is our national symbol. The clover leaf, the maple leaf is the symbol of Canada. So for the Jewish people, the grapevine was the national symbol. And it's said that at the temple had vines growing, carved into all the doorways and filled with pure gold, just to show them that was their symbol of the vine. In the Old Testament, a lot of use of the symbol is used because God is the one who is the caregiver. He is the one who takes care of the vine, which is the people of Israel. He is the one who will build the hedge around them. He is the one who plants it. He is the one who plants and accepts and digs, chooses what's going to be planted in the vineyard. And when there's a bad vine, he tears it out. So God is seen as the one who tends the grapes and the vines. Jesus today uses that symbol, and he says to them, God is the caregiver, but I am the vine, and from the vine comes the branches. Remain close to me. Remain close to me. Allow me to be a part of your life. The hard part is that sometimes the other branches get in the way, and there is a need in our life to prune a little bit, to kind of take away all those things that really become in our life from being who we are really called to be. You know, can I give an example of that? Some of you cut some of your bushes and your trees down to the ground, right? Now they're starting to sprout. And they have lots and lots and lots of little sprouts coming up. And the question is, which one is the sprout that's going to be the major sprout that will grow? So you've had to make some choices on that. That's the pruning that Jesus is saying about us, that sometimes we are people who begin to sprout these other kind of branches out, and these branches will lead us to many other places in our life. And so we have to be pruned periodically to get perspective in our life. Pruned. Sometimes, you like to say, sometimes you've got to die to yourself a little bit. So for some of you who can go remember back years ago, there was a woman whose name was Kubler-Ross, and she wrote the first books on dying, death and dying. It was a very interesting book because she said everybody dies every day. In other words, everybody is pruned every day of their life. But we don't realize that we're pruned every day of our life. There are things that happen in our life every day that we're pruned, that we close that part of our life out. As you sit here today, you've had a major pruning in your life. This last year has been very interesting. And this last year has pruned you very severely. Sometimes you don't quite know where you are because the pruning has been so severe in your life. Where am I in my relationship to my community, in my relationship to my family, in relationship to all those things that are so important in my life? Where am I? And it's so beautiful that today the Lord reminds us that He's the branches, He's the vine that gives the branches nourishment. And today, as we sit here, sometimes wondering if He's pruned us too far, He's saying, Bill, I pruned you just enough to be able to serve the people, enough to be able to serve my family, enough to serve the people around me, to serve the community. It's always a question we need to ask ourselves. Where we are today, and God has pruned us, where is God leading you today? Now that you've been freshly pruned, where is God leading you now? And I think we're always afraid to ask that question because that question is an unknown question. And God is always before us, calling us forward. Ask yourself, God's pruned you. Now, where are you? Where is He leading you? Where is he nourishing you in your life? And only you and I can answer that question. For he is the vine, we are the branches, and we have been pruned to bear much fruit.